The things I do for you guys, eh? Yep, this is another Broken Meeple review, and for the next couple of reviews I'll be taking a look at a publisher called Resurrecting Games. Fairly recently into the board gaming industry, they have started to bring back old games which are, you know, they were lost to time. They may have been classics in the old days, and now they've gone back, streamlined a few things, maybe tweaked a few rules here and there, and of course given them a major cosmetic upgrade. So I'm going to be looking at two of those in particular over the next couple of reviews, that being the racing game Downforce, but first we're going to take a look at the trick-taking game Indulgence. Now Indulgence, like I say, trick-taking game, and to be fair, I don't think I have another trick-taking game in my collection at all. It's not normally a genre I go for, or at least I haven't found a trick-taking game that's like really sung to me. Though I have not tried Diamonds yet. I need to try that one. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy a trick-taking game. I don't know, they just never seen any that I felt I needed in the collection. Plus, when I go to others and say, "Oh, we want to play a trick-taking game," they tend to sort of brush it aside and choose something else. So it's a hard one to get out. Indulgence is a reprint of an old game called, I believe, Dragon Master in 1982. And before that, in the 60s, it was called Coup d'Etat. So I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But it's gone through several iterations over time, and for a long while, it's been pretty much lost to time. You know, no one's ever heard of it. No one's been able to have a copy of it. So this is the new version of it with similar rules, just a few tweaks here and there, but certainly a major cosmetic upgrade. Now, what you do in Indulgence is it plays out like most trick-taking games. So if you're familiar with the concept that you play a card of a suit and you're trying to have if you want to win the trick, you must have the highest number of that suit when it goes round. There may be a trump suit, which overrides any other cards played if it's that suit. You know, if you're familiar with those concepts, you're already familiar with half of this game. The trick, however, is that despite the fact you have these four suits and the typical trick-taking rules, you have these edict cards that are laid out. There's 3 of them at a time, and each player takes it in turn to be, I forget the name, I believe it's like the prophet or bishop or something, basically like a spokesperson. And they choose one of those edict laws that all players must follow. And the idea is that the other players are supposed to follow that rule, and it can be something like, don't take any purples, don't take any sixes, do not take the first and last trick, for example. And if they breach those rules, they have to give that person money, and money is essentially the victory points for the game. But a player can choose to sin, in which they flip the card over and basically say, I'm going to do the opposite of whatever that law is. So if it says don't take any sixes, you're actually saying I'm going to take all the sixes. And you'll base this based on, your hand, which will get dealt out ahead of time. So you'll be thinking, there's a good chance I could get all the sixes here. I'm going for it. And so if that happens, everybody's pretty much against the sinning player. But otherwise, everyone's just trying not to breach the rules because they don't want to give that player money. Everybody will take turns doing this for 3 rounds, and whoever has the most money at the end of all that is the winner. It's a pretty simple concept. But there's quite a few of these edicts out. Granted, some of them are just basically repeats of each other, like don't take all the greens, don't take all the purples, don't take all the reds. But there's a few interesting ones in there, and some are certainly harder than others to not breach, and some are particularly difficult to sin. Now, the sinning part is where this game comes alive, because if you just do nothing but don't breach the rules, it's okay, it's a normal trick-taking game. But if you do that sinning part, then you're effectively pushing your luck. It's almost like a shoot the moon mechanic. And if you are able to succeed in your sinning, you'll get a lot more money from the other players. So it's one of those things where you're trying to do a big chunk of like cash grab at that point. And it's pretty good if you're falling behind to do stuff like that, because you might have lost a bit of money and now it's like, oh, but if I sin now, I might be able to pull myself back. You know, there's times like that, and it just depends how, shall we say, prone to risk you are when it comes to doing the sinnings, because some of them are harder than they look, but they reward in that respect. So with this, like I say, pretty simple concept. You do a bit of push of luck now and again, but mainly it's standard trick-taking rules. The edicts, though, keep things nice and varied from round to round, and depending on the group you're with, you'll get different ways of playing just by like how much they want to shoot the moon or not. The cosmetic upgrades in this are pretty solid. Artwork is okay. It's not my style really, but it is colourful. And you have tarot-sized cards. No sleeves, it's not Love Letter Premium, but you certainly get tarot-sized cards. Not too difficult. I mean, one pack of sleeves for tarot size will do these ones fine. And they look good in your hand. They're nice and colourful. The coins, they're kind of weird little sort of cardboard coins, but hey, they look nice and shiny. It's they got like some sort of paint over them that makes them shine quite a lot. So yeah, that's quite cool. You get these different coloured gems just to represent 5. And it's kind of weird. They're all multicoloured and there's no difference between them. So I don't know, I suppose you just like to have a bunch of gems in front of you. The edict cards, nicely laid out, easy graphic design, good cardstock quality. But the weirdest thing in this is that you actually get a actual ring. I'll see if I can get the box open, because it is quite a tight fitting lid, this one. But I'm just going to show you. You might not be able to see it in the camera. I'll try and put a picture up if not, but here you go. Whoop. Yeah, you probably can't see that too well. I'm going to put a picture up as well. But this is a solid, chunky ring. Proper ring. With a little red jewel inside it that I can actually put on my finger. It actually fits on my finger to use in the game. And then decides when to come off. But the idea is that all that is that every time you sin, that ring basically turns the card, whatever value it is, into a 10. So it's almost like a way of auto-winning that hand. Kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card, if you've not been able to do that well in that trick. They could have done that with a token. They put an actual ring in the game. That's how much this publisher is actually really trying to up the cosmetic, look of these games. Because, I mean, trick-taking games, there's only so much you have to do to make them look nice. Just put some colourful artwork on the cards, and that's pretty much the deal. It's trick-taking. What do you expect? There's not going to be miniatures, for example. It's not Cool Mini or Not. But, cool, could you imagine Cool Mini or Not doing a trick-taking game? Ugh. Not something I want to imagine. But, yeah, they've done a solid job making this look a lot more striking on the table. But how does it play? Well, it kind of varies. This one, it can fall flat at times, or it can do really well. It really does depend on the players you're with. You'll get some that will constantly try to sin. They'll be like, yeah, I'm going to try and sin, and I'm going to take you out, no problem, and I'm going to have all this money. And that can be quite exciting. Granted, a lot of the times they'll fail. In fact, I would say 75% of the time you're going to fail a sin rather than pass it, but it's good that a lot of people will try that. If you get a group that's a bit more risk averse though, that doesn't really want to sin, it can fall a little bit flat, because then it just turns into a fairly basic trick-taking game where you just try to avoid a certain rule. And that can get a little bit repetitive, especially if you're playing this with 4 players, like the max count, and you're waiting 3 rounds. But 3 rounds does not take that long to play through. The game says it will take 45 to 60 minutes, and that's pretty accurate. That's about as long as I think you would take to play through this, although, do most trick-taking games take that long to play? 45 to 60 minutes seems a while for what is essentially playing tricks from cards. I don't know, I mean, it doesn't feel long. 4 players maybe, but 2 players, you can't even play this with 2. That's the weird thing, it's literally 3 to 4. So it's quite a limited player count. But 4 works fine. I think 3 is probably the best one, but it works just as fine with either. You're just going to have to accept there's a little bit of extra game length when you play with 4. There's also an advanced mode in this game where you have a card that says that all 3 edicts are in play. That is told. It tells you in the rulebook that you should use it after you've played a game of this already. But to be honest, this is not a difficult game to learn. So I would throw it in every time and never look back, because it does really improve the game. Because rounds where you've got to obey 3 rules rather than just 1 become a lot more entertaining. And then if you have those people who really like, if you can hear something outside, I do apologize for that, but I can only record when I can. But this card, you can also flip it to the sin side and say, I'm going to achieve all 3 of those sin cards. If you do that, you win the game outright. Now, I know that sounds tempting, but yeah, winning one of those sin cards is hard enough. Winning all 3, you are hoping. In fact, I would put it down that trying to do all 3 of them is pretty much certain death. Now, to be fair, if you think you're already losing the game and you know you're not going to get as much money as someone else, then by all means, flip that card, say I'm going to sell all 3 of them, and try and go for a game win, because you may just pull it off and then it will be hilarious when you do. But yeah, it's not one that you're going to use if you're somewhere in the lead. This is kind of like the last minute do or die card. You know, the do or die card out of Escape from Colditz, the board game, essentially, is the equivalent. So, you know, throw it in every time and don't look back. The advanced edicts, there's some you can separate out. Again, just throw them in. Just throw everything in. It's a trick-taking game. It's not difficult to learn. Difficult to master, though. You have perfect information in this game. There's no cards left out of each round. They're all equally dealt out to other players. So you know exactly what cards you don't have are both out there. And you're trying to think, who's likely to have got that? And if somebody plays a card that means that they've run out of a particular suit, then you know that the only ones that are left are held by like other players. And, you know, with 3 of you, you can start doing some process of elimination. With 4 of you, it's a little bit more chaotic, which is why I prefer this as a 3-player game more than a 4. Because there's just that little less element of chaos when you've only got to think about 2 opponents as opposed to 3 sitting around you. So there's not much else to say really about the game, but that is essentially what you do. It's trick-taking with some extra rules thrown into the rounds to make each round fresh. And it's solid. I don't think it's amazing. Maybe it's my sort of bias that I don't play many trick-taking games, but if you're a trick-taking fan, I think this is definitely one that you should give a look. If you're not necessarily into that genre, then still give it a try. You know, if you're new to trick-taking games, then this is a good one to start with, because it is very simple to learn, yet can be, you know, fresh and varied with each game. So it's definitely one to look into. I'm going to hang on to this one for a while personally, just to see, because to be fair, I do need a trick-taking game in the collection, and this one should be able to fit on my shelf quite easily, because it is relatively compact. Could have been a slightly smaller box, but not much smaller, so it's one that's relatively portable, especially for a card game with this many components in it, you know, ring and jewels and money and stuff like that. But I would suppose, if we're going to go with any particular cons, I would say that the sinning part, you know, where you flip the cards over and try and do it all yourself, is maybe a little bit too tricky in some cases. You know, there are some where you might be able to do it, but I rarely, and I mean very rarely, have seen people succeed on the sinning. You know, it's very much push your luck, but it takes effort to work. You cannot just autopilot a sin card. You have to work at it, and there's a chance that very few times will you see a sin work, but, you know, it might depend on your group, it might depend on how good you are at trick-taking games, but that's a little bit of a warning with that, and a potential con. So, Indulgence itself, pretty decent trick-taking game. Gonna hang on to it, but what do you think about it? What do you think of trick-taking games in general, or have you played this and had more luck with the sinning than I have? Personally, I would give this probably a 7 out of 10. But, you know, my ranking system, you'll notice, has changed. You know, I'm more about the strengths and the weaknesses now than I am about just giving it a rating, which, to be fair, most of you aren't that interested in. You know, I'll talk about what my rating of games is, but, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just explaining what the game's about, giving it an opinion, why I like and dislike it, some strengths and cons, and then I leave it to you to make your own decision about whether this is the game for you. So, that's it from me for now. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, where I'll be taking a look at the other game from this publisher, Downforce. Will that be better than this one? Worse? You'll have to see. Until then, just remember that no matter how much you sin the church in this thing, it's still only a game at the end of the day. And I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review. Take care, everyone.